Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue on from my previous video, which was about putting text over images in a new way. Earlier in this series, we talked about having background images, which of course can have text over them. And later on, we talked about having background images in the cells of tables. But in the previous video, we talked about how to have text over images without using a table and without having it as the background image of the whole page. In this video, I'd like to talk about or show you a slightly more complex example, which is more relevant to simulating cards, and in particular simulating collectible card games like Magic the Gathering or the Pokemon card game. So I have an image here which is a very simple example of the typical layout of a collectible card game type card, or a CCG type card. I'll probably use the word CCG from now on, and that just stands for collectible card game. You have generally an image, you have the title of the card, and you have some sort of text, and that text, some sort of text other than the title, and that text can be game information. So in this case, it's sort of meant to look like game information. It says may not be attacked by non-flying creatures, and that's a sort of typical mechanic that you might have in a game like this. You might have some creatures are considered flying and others aren't, and then you might have a mechanic of attacking, and then you might have a special rule that says, well, characters that can't fly can't attack this creature. In a real card game, you'd have more information than this, sometimes quite a lot of information. For example, if you play games like this, you probably notice, well, there's no cost listed. And generally speaking, cards in these games have different costs. So you have sort of very powerful cards and then weaker cards, and hopefully the cost is proportional to their value. So the strong cards cost more, and the other cards cost less, and then that cost can be different things. You can just have counters that are your health or your mana, which is what you have in Magic, or the cost can be somehow played in cards. You have to discard that many cards, or you have to get rid of that many cards from the top of your deck, and if once your deck runs out, that's you losing the game. Whatever. There's usually some way of having more and less powerful cards. And there's often types. This text assumes that there should be some indication of whether a creature is a flying creature or not. You'd presume that the blue dragon itself would be a flying creature, just from sort of our understanding of what a dragon is. And that would be indicated somewhere on the card, probably. There might be an icon, or it might just say flying in this description. That's one sort of text that you have on these cards. The other sort of text is called flavor text. That is, it's cards that, it's text that doesn't have any game effect, but which gives a sense of what's happening. So it might be a quote that's meant to be something that the blue dragon itself would say. It might be an extract, or meant to be an extract from a book written in the world of the game, explaining what this creature is. So if you have Black Path Magician, right, as one of the cards, you might have a little bit of text saying what the Black Path Magicians were, and that's sort of extracted supposedly from a history that was written in the world of the game. You might not have text but at the very least you would have game information conveyed by icons. So this card really is simpler than a real card of its type. But I've tried to sort of come up with an example that's as simple as possible, so I can make the explanation as clear as possible. So we have three elements. We have the picture, we have the title, and we have the extra text. And how could we display this? Well, the simplest way is we could just make a separate image for each card. We could just make a single image that is the Blue Dragon card, and it would have the picture, it would have the title typed here in whatever program we were using, GIMP or Photoshop or whatever. It would have the text printed down here. We'd probably make a template, because we'd probably want all the pictures to be roughly the same height. We want all the rounded corners to look the same and so on. So we'd probably make a template which was like a blank card, and then we'd fill in the template and save that as the specific cards. So yes, you can make a single image, but you might want to break it up. And there's a couple of reasons why you might want to break it up. First of all, this text, you might want to let the player access that text other than by looking at a picture of the card. So what I mean by that is you might have this sort of display where you're looking at the whole card, but then you might have another display, like this display would work well when you're picking cards for your deck. You want to look at the whole card in detail. But then when you're playing the game, if you have all the cards this size, the screen's going to get very crowded, because you're going to have all the cards that you have in your hand. You're going to have all of the cards that you've got in play. Usually in these games, there's a distinction between you have the cards in your hand, and then you have cards in play, and you can sort of manipulate both of them. You may want to display at least how many cards your opponent has. You will be able to see how many cards your opponent has in play, as opposed to their hand. Usually their hand is secret. But of course, when they play something, it's seen by the other players. And then you probably have counters and things as well. So you might have, let's say you have 30 life points or something like that. You want to know that you've got 25 and your opponent has 21. And depending on the game, there's probably other mechanics as well. So this card might have counters on it. There might be some sort of countdown counter that's going to have some other effect. If we have it this size, the screen's going to be very, very crowded. And so you'll probably want to have at least two ways of displaying it. So you might want to have a big display like this, and then you might want to have a small display as well. And that one is used when you're perhaps when you're playing the game. And if you've got a smaller version of this, well, there's an obvious problem, which is, am I going to be able to read may not be attacked by non-flying creatures if the card is only half the size, and therefore the text is only half the size? Well, you can just shrink down the picture, but then that makes the text perhaps a little bit hard to read. So you might want to have something that we've covered already in this game, alt text or mouse over text. So instead of having a shrunken version of this, you might just have an image that is just the picture, for example, and maybe it's about, say, that big. And then when you move your mouse over it, it says Blue Dragon may not be attacked by non-flying creatures, 3 health, flying, whatever, 4 attack, all the other stats that the game might have. And if to do that, you need to have this text. It's very hard to. There we go. You need to have this text in the code of your game, as well as being part of the image, and you also need to have this text, the name Blue Dragon. as stored as part of a text array in your game. And that means if you just do this as an image, that means that you're typing every bit of text twice. Now, that might be okay. I mean, that might be the solution. That might be the best solution, is to type everything twice. But remember that in a collectible card game, you need to have really at least 100 cards, I would say. I mean, the range of cards that you can make your deck from is much bigger than the range of a normal deck of playing cards. Normal deck of playing cards, you have 52, or maybe 53 or 54 if you use jokers. I would say a collectible card game that had less than 100 would be a bit basic, probably. So when you say we'll type everything twice, that means you're going to type at least 100 things twice. And so you're probably going to want to look for a way to get out of that if you can. And that's where putting text over images is very useful, because instead of having a single image that is the card, you could just have this bit as an image, and then you could save Blue Dragon as text, and you could save may not be attacked by non-flying creatures as text in the code of your game. And you could have a single image that is the bit of the card that covers the title, and you could have a single image that is the bit of the card that covers the extra text, and then you could print that image and just have the text on top of it. And so if you do that, you don't need to type this text into the image when you're making the image. You just create this top image and then have a routine that takes the text from whatever array you've saved it in and displays the standard middle of the card graphic and the standard bottom of the card graphic. And that is what I've done here. This is actually, what you're looking at is actually 3 images. And then these 2 images have text on them. And so you can see that if I can select the text, and so I could copy that text and I could paste it, and you can see that it's like normal text. I could paste it into a Word file, or I could paste it into a search bar or whatever. It's not just a picture, and that is going to save me quite a lot of work if I want to make a collectible card game style game in Twine. Doing it that way is going to save me a lot of work, because it means I don't have to have this text in an image. I just have to have a standard bottom of the card image and a standard middle of the card image, and then I just have a routine that allows me to put the text on top of that and has the relevant picture at the top, and importantly displays it without gaps. And that's roughly what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about how I made this layout. Now we've established sort of the point, like why we would want to do that. We'll talk about how to do it. It's not as easy as you might think, because Twine likes to put gaps in between all pictures. So we have to do it in a very specific way. We can't use, for example, we can't use HTML tables because the cells, we could have this in, we might think, well, we'll have a table and we'll have 3 rows, and each row will have 1 cell, and then this will be 1 cell, and then this will be 1 cell, and then this bottom will be 1 cell. Unfortunately, that creates little gaps, and we want it to be continuous, of course, so that it appears to be a single card. Now, I won't go through the steps of how I did the template. I made 3 pictures. Let's just move this out of the way. Actually, I won't do that. I made 3 pictures. This is one picture. This center bit is another picture, and this bottom bit is a third picture. But I've noticed that when I do tutorials, I made it in GIMP, which is the free program that I use that's very similar to Photoshop. I've noticed that when I do tutorials on how to do things in GIMP, they're not very popular. People don't want to look at them. They don't get a lot of upvotes. They don't get a lot of views. They don't get a lot of subscribers. So it seems like you guys don't want that. Either you're fine with knowing how to make graphics, or you don't use GIMP, or you get that information from someone else and you want to get programming information from me. So I haven't done that due to sort of popular demand, but if you want me to, I certainly will, right? I'm happy to go through GIMP and go step by step with how to make. I've already done a tutorial on how to make rounded corners, but just the process of making this set of 3 images. But let's get on to the programming and how do we make them sit next to each other in the way that we want, and how do we make that text appear over the right image. Well, there's a single page. Now, the way that I've programmed it, I just have the text sort of written there. So here we have Blue Dragon, and here we have, sorry, my mouse button's not working great. Here we have may not be attacked by flying creatures, and here we have Blue Dragon. Of course, in a real game, you'd have an array. You'd have a text array, and the text array would probably include the names and the extra text. You'd probably have a single array that included game information as well. So you'd have the whatever was in use, its attack, its defense, its powers, any keywords that it has, and so on and so on. You'd have a single array with the sort of relevant information of all of the cards. And then you'd, instead of just saying Blue Dragon, you'd say something like print B plus card Z0 plus /bold. So let's say the array was C for cards, and let's say that Z was the number of the card that you wanted to look at, and let's say the name of the card was in slot 0. You'd say print this tag that tells the text to be bold, and then print the title, and then print the tag that tells it to end the bold. And then you do the same, do something similar down here, but you might have, perhaps that text is in slot 1, for example. All right, so let's have a look at what we're doing. Once again, we're having divs within divs, divs being sort of paragraphs. We have a less than sign, because there's only one. That tells us that this is a HTML command. It's a command that's common to all webs. Well, I mean, some websites may not use HTML, but that's the standard language for websites, and this is something we might see on any normal website. It's not a command that's specific to Twine. If it was specific to Twine, we would have 2 of those instead of 1, and at the end of it we would have two greater thans instead of 1. So in other words, we know that we can do this if we were just making a normal website and we were typing in the code ourselves. We could do this and it would work. So we have less than, div, space, style equals, then we have within quotes a series of specifications for the paragraph, and all we are specifying is that the width is 200 px, which is pixels, and the height is 263 px, which is pixels. And we separate, we always have a colon after width, height, color. Whenever we specify which element of the style we're talking about, we have a colon, then we type the value of that particular element, in this case 200 px, which is pixels, and we separate those with semicolons. So don't get confused between colons, which go here, and semicolons, which go here. At the end, you don't have to have a semicolon, but you can. In this case, I have. It's probably good practice to just have a semicolon each time, because then you don't get confused. But sometimes I don't do that. In fact, I think I didn't do it a couple of times down here. So I'm not following my own advice, but it probably is good advice to have a semicolon every time. And remember to put the quotes in. So all that does is, okay, here's a paragraph. It's got to be exactly 200 pixels wide, and it's got to be exactly 263 pixels high. Now, I have, when I was making these card elements, I made sure that the width was 200, and I made sure that the total height was 263. If it didn't add up properly, then something would go wrong in the display. It might sort of not display the whole picture, perhaps, or it might have gaps. But yeah, you need to make sure, of course, that this is the exact width and this is the exact height. So these three elements add up to 263. I think we've got 144 and 34, which adds up to 178. 178 plus 85, yeah, is 263. Okay, so we have this div, and then within the div, we have an image, a div, which of course requires a slash div, and another, oh my goodness, this mouse, there we go, another div and slash div. Note that the image, which is img, doesn't need a slash image, because I guess because you specify, it's always just this one thing, as opposed to with a div, you can have as much in here. I could keep typing text as much as I wanted. It wouldn't look very good, but it would be valid HTML. So because that can kind of go on as long as I want, we have to have some sort of tag that says, okay, this is the end of the div. Everything within here is part of the paragraph. Whereas an image, it's sort of automatically just the one thing. So we have now, and notice that it's img, and notice that that's the same command that we use. There's a specific Twine command that is img, and that they do the same thing. Img in HTML displays an image, img in Twine displays an image, but the format is completely different. They are effectively, they're two different commands, really, two different ways of doing a very similar thing. So don't get confused. Don't try and do this sort of specification, this sort of layout as a Twine command, and don't try and do this sort of, don't try and do the other sort of layout that you would use for Twine in one of these. They are effectively completely different commands, and they're two different languages. They just happen to both use img for their command for displaying an image. So we have img style equals, and then we have quotes, height 144 px, width 200 px, float left, which aligns it to the left. You might think, well, why does it need to be aligned left if the width is 200? It's going to be sort of exactly. If the width of the paragraph is 200 and the image is 200, it's going to fit exactly in the paragraph. There's no real difference between aligning it left, aligning it right, and aligning it in the center. Nonetheless, you still have to put that because, well, I don't know why you have to put that, but without it, I found that it doesn't work properly. So we have the style equals all of those things, and then we have src equals, and we have art/, blue dragon card.png, which that's just the location and the name of the picture. Now, note that this is a third way of specifying the location and source of an image. So for this one, we've got img style equals, and there's going to be various things in there, and then we have src equals quote, and the location and name go like that. Then we have, when we have a background image, we have another thing where we did this yesterday, and we're going to see another example today, where the name and location of the image is part of the style, whereas in this one it's not in the style. It's src equals. It's a different thing to the source. So we have style equals ... and then we have background image URL bracket, and the location and name is within single quotes, and then there's and then that's within brackets, and then there'd be a semicolon if we're going to have more stuff in the style marker. And then we have image, and image obviously works in a different way in that you start with two less thans and end with two greater thans, and you have square brackets. So there's three different ways of specifying the location and name of an image, and you be sure not to get confused and use the wrong one. We have one when we're using an img command, and we have to specify the source, which is src equals. Then we have a div with a background image, and then if we're using an img command within Twine, they're all three different things, and unfortunately, sort of, well, they do very similar things, and in two cases they both use img. So obviously it's very easy to get confused, but if you're trying something with images and it's not working, make sure that you're not thinking of a different way of specifying which image to use. Okay, so we have this img. The reason we're using divs here is because we need to do that to put text over the image. So for this, we can just have img. It's probably a lot simpler. Then we have the one that's the title. And this is similar to what we looked at in the previous video, but I'll go through it again. Less than, div, space, style equals, then it's all in quotes, and all the different elements are separated by semicolons, and the name of what we're specifying and the value that we're giving it is separated by a colon. So we have height, colon, 34px, width, 100%. Now, you might think, well, why don't you just put 200px? Well, when I did 200px, it didn't work properly. When I did 100%, meaning 100% of the available space, which in this case will be 200% because we've already specified it's within a 200 pixel wide, sorry, it won't be 200%, it'll be 200 pixels. We've already specified this is within a 200 pixel wide paragraph. When I did 100%, it worked. So I can't give you any logical reason why this one works and the other one doesn't. It seems like 200 pixels should work, but I found that it didn't print the whole image. It printed the text aligned to the left, and then it only printed the bit of the image that covered the text. So when I did width 100%, it worked. It's just one of those things you've got to learn, or at least remember where to look it up. It doesn't seem like it. There doesn't seem like any logical reason why this should work, but it does seem to be how you do it. Again, we need to do float left. This time we do background dash image, colon, space, URL, bracket, a single quote, then the location and name, which in this case is art/card space center.png, and then another single quote and an end bracket. Color black, that specifies that the text is going to be black. This text here, it's got nothing to do with the image. Text align is center again, and font size is 19px, which is 19 pixels. And then we just have the text, which includes a bold and slash bold tags. Normally, from what I've seen, the titles of these things are in bold. If you don't like that, you don't have to do it, of course. And that prints this text over the image art/card-center.png, and that saves us typing everything twice, as I've already said. Now, why make this 19 pixels? Why make this, as you can see, a little bit bigger? Well, the reason is, if you want to horizontally align text, that's fairly easy. In other words, you can specify that it's to be centered, or to be left justified, or to be right justified. There's a couple of other ones, but those are the three main ones. That's fairly easy. But what about vertically specifying the vertical alignment? In a HTML, in a cell of a table, that's quite easy as well. But we can't really use a table for this task because tables make gaps between pictures or between the different cells, which is not what we want. So if you want to vertically align, in other words, align towards the top and the bottom, and you're not using a HTML table, and it's not a cell within a table, it's surprisingly difficult. And when I had this as the normal size text, the default text, which is what this text below is, when I had Blue Dragon as the default text size, it was off center. It was more towards the top of this picture than the bottom. And I could have made the picture a different size, I suppose, but I tried doing padding, but that made it it made it start to tile this image, i.e. we got a little bit of the top of the image as well as it printed one copy of the center image, and then it started to print the top as well. And of course, that's not what we want. We want it to print exactly one image and nothing else. So padding didn't work. And the best way that I found to make it look right was just by increasing the size until it happened to be, and happened to be vertically about right. Which is, it's not a very elegant solution. I mean, there are ways to vertically align it, but it gets quite complicated, and you have to start doing CSS. You have to start mucking around with the CSS of the program, i.e. the bit. The style sheet, the bit that's in here. I specified that the background color should be green just because it's easier to see the card. Because the card is black, I didn't want the normal light grey background. That's why that's in there. But so the sort of easy solution was to make it slightly larger. And then, of course, having done that, I have to make sure that every title of a card is within a certain text size. I can't have really long card titles, or something will start to go wrong. And really, this div is just a copy of this one. It's got the same. The only difference is that I didn't change the font size, and of course the background image is different. art/cardbottom.png, and of course the height is different as well because the picture's a different size. But we specify that the text should be black, the text align should be center, and we print the different text, and again that prints that picture and prints the text over the image, allowing us to use the image again and again for different cards, and allowing us to use the text that we've got in the code without having to type it out again. So that is our way of having a collectible card game style layout, and obviously that's going to be useful as we start to look at simulating those sort of games within Twine. I will say The only way to be 100% certain that everyone is seeing exactly the same thing, regardless of what browser they're using, is to, and regardless of how, what settings they've set up, is to do it as a single image, right? But in terms of sort of the balance between how precise a result can I get and how much work is it going to be, I'd suggest that this is probably quite a good balance. For most people, it's probably not going to be worth typing everything up as an image. If you found this text, if you really hated that font and you wanted like a fantasy type font or a science fiction type of font, you might have to sort of do that as an image and then type the text up again in the code. But if this look is acceptable to you, if this doesn't look too generic, if you're not too invested in getting a specific style, I think the best balance might be what we've done here. And so, of course, now that we've got that, we can start to look at how we're going to come up with mechanics that allow people to make a deck, for example, which is probably the first thing that we'd look at in terms of collectible card games. So that's what I'll hopefully be getting onto in future. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.